Good evening, friends. Today I'm going to explain the osteology of tibia. So, first it contains upper end, lower end, and shaft. This is the shaft of the tibia. In the shaft, you can see the sharp anterior border. You can appreciate here. This is the sharp anterior border present in the shaft. This is the upper end, and this is lower end. Upper end is somewhat broad, as you can see, and lower end you can see somewhat narrow in shape. Coming to the side determination of bone, it's very important. So first you must keep the upper end up and lower end down. First point. Second point is the sharp anterior border which is present in shaft should place anteriorly. So the sharp anterior border should be anteriorly. And one more point is below the upper end, here in front of upper end and below, you can see this part. This is called tibial tuberosity. That also should be placed anteriorly, like this. So like this is second point, and third point is major point. That is here you can see the extension. This is called medial malleolus or tibial malleolus. Okay, that should be placed medially. If you place medially here, okay. If you place like this is also medially, but this sharp anterior sharp border is posterior. You must not place like that. Sharp anterior border should be anteriorly, and this part should be medially, medial malleolus. So this is of the right tibia. Now coming to the features in the upper end. Upper end, you can see the medial and lateral condyle. This is medial condyle and lateral condyle. Okay. Medial condyle is somewhat larger and lateral condyle is somewhat small compared to medial condyle. And between the two condyle, there is a intercondylar tubercle. This is a medial intercondylar tubercle. This is lateral intercondylar tubercle. Okay. Now below the condyle, this is condyle, right? Below the condyle, as I said before, this is in front, the anterior surface in front of the condyle. There is a tibial tuberosity. Okay, this is tibial tuberosity, and this gives the attachment of the ligamentum patellae. And in front of the lateral condyle, this is lateral condyle. In front of it, this part you can see here. This is called gradis tubercle. Gradis tubercle, which gives attachments for the iliotibial tract. Gradis tubercle, and which gives attachment for the iliotibial tract or iliotibial band. So coming to the posterior side, if I turn posterior, here you can see this was medial condyle. Posterior of the medial condyle, here you can see a groove. This groove you can see, this groove. This groove gets attachment for the muscle, which I'll be discussing later. Okay, this is a groove in the posterior surface of medial malleolus, and just below the lateral malleolus, posterior surface, you can appreciate here. See, there is a circular facet. This there is a circular facet. Okay, this gives attachment for the superior tibiofibular joint. Superior tibiofibular joint. Okay. Now, next coming to the lower end. Lower end, you can see medial malleolus. This is medial malleolus, also called as tibial malleolus, and laterally you can see a triangular impression here. This is called a fibular notch for tibia. Fibular notch of tibia. This triangle impression is a fibular notch of tibia, where the fibula get attached here. And inferiorly you can see this is inferior. You can see the articulation with the thallus bone forming ankle joint. This is the articulation of thallus bone forming ankle joint, inferior of the lower end. Now coming to the shaft. This is shaft. Okay. In that, coming to the borders, starting, see, this is anterior border. As I said, anterior border is sharp. This is anterior border. Okay, so it begins from the tibial tuberosity. This is tibial tuberosity, right? Tibial tuberosity, and continues till the, what is this, anterior border of the medial malleolus. This is anterior border of medial malleolus. This is posterior border of medial malleolus. So anterior border of the tibia starts from the tibial tuberosity, continues till the anterior border of medial malleolus. Okay, coming to the posterior border. Posterior border, it starts from here. If you see, it starts just below the medial malleolus. Okay, just below the medial malleolus, and it continues here till the posterior border of the medial malleolus. Okay, from the below the medial malleolus continues till the posterior border of medial malleolus. Now, interosseous border. You can see this another line here. This is called interosseous border. This is called interosseous border, also called as lateral border. So it starts below the circular facet, as I said here, which gives attachments for what? Superior-tibio-fibular joint. This is circular facet, which is present just below the lateral condyle. Okay, this interosseous border begins below the circular facet here, and it continues till the posterior margin of fibular notch of tibia. This triangular depression or triangular impression was called as fibular notch of tibia, and this was anterior margin, and this is posterior margin of fibular notch of tibia. So interosseous border begins just below the circular facet and continues till the posterior margin of fibular notch of tibia. Okay, now coming to the attachments. Before attachments, it also contains three surface. Okay, so we keep in the anatomical position like this: sharp anterior border, interosseous border, and posterior border. Okay, this is called here, this is medial malleolus. That means this is medial surface. This is medial surface. This is subcutaneous. There is no attachments of any muscle. Okay, and between the anterior border and interosseous border, you can see the lateral surface, and between the interosseous border and the posterior border, you can see the posterior surface. This is posterior surface between the interosseous border and the posterior border. Okay, now attachments in the upper end. In the upper end, you can see the attachment. This is called medial condyle and lateral condyle, right? Here you can see a medial meniscus, okay, which is large, and this is lateral meniscus. Okay, and in the intercondylar area, you can see ligaments, two ligaments. This was meniscus, medial meniscus and lateral meniscus. In the intercondylar area, as I said before, you can see intercondylar this intercondylar tubercles. This was a medial intercondylar tubercle. This was lateral intercondylar tubercle. Now you can see ligaments. Okay, in the intercondylar area. This is this part here. This full is intercondylar area. This part is called anterior cruciate ligament, and here posterior cruciate ligament. Okay, in the intercondylar area. Now, in the intercondylar area, you must know the attachments of uh, various features. That is from anterior to posterior. There is a mnemonic called Medical College Lucknow, Lucknow Medical College, Medical College Lucknow, Lucknow Medical College. Okay, all these medical college Lucknow take the starting letter MCLLMC. Okay, stands for anterior horn of medial meniscus, anterior horn of medial meniscus. C stands for anterior cruciate ligament. L stands for anterior horn of lateral meniscus. Another L stands for posterior horn of lateral meniscus. Another M stands for posterior horn of medial meniscus. Last C stands for posterior cruciate ligament. Okay. Medical College Lucknow, Lucknow Medical College. Next, coming to the upper end attachments. Okay. As I said before, what is this? Tibial tuberosity. Here, there is attachment of ligamentum patellae. From the patella gets attached. And in front of lateral condyle, you can see here, this is called Grady's tubercle. There is an attachment for the iliotibial tract or band. Now posterior side, I said there was a groove, and this gives the insertion for the one of the hamstring muscle, that is semimembranosus. Insertion of semimembranosus in the groove just behind the medial condyle in the posterior surface. And in the posterior surface, lateral behind the lateral condyle, there was circular facet. This makes the superiotibiofibrillar joint, which is a plain type of synovial joint. Okay. Now coming to the shaft. Shaft, as I said, this was a medial. This was medial surface, right? This is full of subcutaneous. There is no insertion except in the upper part. Upper part you can see the insertion of some muscles. In the upper part there is insertion of three muscles. 1, 2, and 3. This is called, like hockey, it is called as sartorius. Next is gracilis, and next is semitendinosus. Sartorius, gracilis, semitendinosus. These three are called as gyrop's muscle. And these three tendons are separated by a bursa called anserine bursa. Okay. Now, this was medial surface. Lateral surface. What is lateral surface? Between the anterior border and the interosseous border is lateral surface. Here you can get the origin of the tibialis anterior muscle. Okay. And posterior surface next, which is present between the interosseous border and posterior border. Here you can get the insertion or origin of the tibialis posterior. This was tibialis anterior, here tibialis posterior. Next, in the posterior surface, if you turn, you can see this dark line. I think you can appreciate this. This is called soleus line. Soleus line, where you get the insertion. You get the origin of the soleus muscle. Okay, and above it, you can see the insertion of the popliteus muscle. Above the soleus line, you can see the insertion of popliteus muscle. Below soleus line, you can see in the posterior surface, just behind of the here the origin of the tibialis posterior. Below the soleus line, here you can see the origin of the flexor digitorum longus. This is flexor digitorum longus. Okay, this is flexor digitorum longus. Below the soleus line, there are two insertions in the posterior surface. That is flexor digit. Below the soleus line, there are two origin of the muscle. That is in the posterior surface. That is the flexor digitorum longus and tibialis posterior. And in the lateral surface, you can see the origin of the tibialis anterior. Above the soleus line, you can see the insertion of the popliteus. Okay. This is about the tibia. Hope you understood. Thank you.